To discuss the issues around the South China Sea, or as it's known in the Philippines, the West Philippine Sea, I am speaking to the Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Jose Manuel Romualdez.
Thank you for inviting me to.
We're recording this, of course, hours after the Philippine National Security Advisor called for the expulsion of Chinese diplomats in the Philippines. Surely a further sign of worsening ties between the two countries. What is your reaction to that call?
Obviously, the Chinese embassy was erroneous in insinuating that there was any kind of agreement that was made between the Philippine government and the Chinese embassy or the Chinese officials. The fact that they said that they recorded it is already in itself a violation of our laws. But just the same, I think that the call for this expulsion is only a reaction to what we feel is totally undiplomatic, to say the least.
Now, going back to that alleged gentleman's agreement between the previous president, former President Rodrigo Duterte, and the government of China, where both sides have alleged that there was a promise in place for the Philippines not to enforce its claims on Second Thomas Shoal more assertively to maintain the status quo. Is this something that comes up? Is this something that comes up in your discussions here in your capacity as the ambassador to the U.S. when you interact with officials in Washington?
Well, the first time we ever heard about it was just not too long ago, and obviously nobody knows anything about this gentleman's agreement. I think there's been some questions being asked. I think President Marcos himself has been asking what kind of an agreement this is. When was it made? Who made the agreement? And if there's something on paper, obviously, that's something that we need to be able to look at. But there seems to be no indication that there's any kind of agreement that was ever made.
Are we going to see the actual expulsion of Chinese diplomats from the Philippines?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. But quite honestly, there's been a lot of complaints coming from many people about comments made by some Chinese officials that are obviously totally wrong, and at the same time perhaps even changing the narrative that is supposed to be correct in any kind of language. So this has been happening quite often, and so there could be a situation where we may just have to go ahead and expel some of these Chinese officials.
To have it more clearly stated on the record, sir, what is it that the Chinese officials are saying that you are saying is wrong?
Well, first and foremost, every time there is an incident that happens in the whenever we have our supply ships go to the Sierra Madre, in the Ayugan Shoal, they say that it was us that provoked this. So that obviously is again, something that is totally out of context, well, not only out of context, but totally wrong. And they're changing the entire story of really what is happening. We've been trying our best to really reach out to the Chinese government in many ways. I think the president has clearly stated on many occasions that he would like to find a way to be able to resolve all the issues peacefully and to sit down, our officials to sit down and find ways and means to be able to have a situation where there could be some peace, at the very least, that there will be none of these provocations that are being done to us.
What response have you been getting from the Chinese?
It's a slow progress. We're trying hard as much as we can to reach out and really sit down seriously to talk about the very many issues surrounding this situation that we're now in.
What do you say is the biggest issue?
Well, the biggest issue obviously is the fact that they are challenging our territorial integrity and our sovereignty. And that is one issue that obviously to a certain extent is non-negotiable. What we would like to do is to find a way to be able to just tell them that if you leave our ships to be able to simply supply our soldiers that are in the Sierra Madre, that in itself is already an indication that they're willing to sit down and talk to us seriously.
While we are on the subject, zooming out more generally, how would you compare President Marcos's current policy to China with former President Duterte, and how would you account for the difference?
I would like to think, since I was the first appointed by President Duterte here in Washington, D.C., and he was obviously the chief foreign policy maker in the Philippines, I followed this line that we did not want to be taken for granted by the United States, and that we wanted to see how we could really work together and simply respect our sovereignty and our and what is best for our mutual interests. And then in relation to China, I think President Duterte wanted to reach out to China and find a way to be able to just have some peace in the area. I think his primary concern was to have our fishermen be able to fish in the waters that they've been used to doing so for many, many years, for hundreds of years, as a matter of fact. But obviously, things like nothing really came out of it, in the sense that the Chinese still continued to declare that this area was theirs. And so when President Marcos took over the presidency, he was able to have a discussion with President Xi that they would have a high level, a system of communicating with each other and make sure that everything's at peace and so forth and so on. And then later on, the laser incident happened, and then the water cannoning, and so everything just went south. And I think President Marcos said it very well when he met with the Chinese ambassador and said that it's really, China was making it very difficult for us to be their friend because of what was doing. And President Marcos declared during the State of the Nation address, his first one, he says that he will not allow 1 square inch to be taken by any country. And I think that he has followed that strictly, and so this is where we are today.
If I understand correctly, does that mean that the basic difference, the basic difference between the policies of President Duterte and President Marcos, that difference has been fueled by China's behavior?
Well, there's no question about it. Obviously, any country would like to have, as we said, we don't want to have any enemies, an enemy to none. A friend to all and an enemy to none is something that we all want to have. But what is happening right now is the reverse. There is a country that is obviously infringing on our sovereignty, and so we can't just simply sit down and take this, because first and foremost, it is the duty of the President of the Republic of the Philippines. It's in the Constitution that he must protect and defend the territory of the Philippines.
Now, going back to Washington, of course, where we are, you've made this point that these incidences between Philippine ships and Chinese ships have continued unabated. What is it that you want the U.S. government to do in order to put a stop to these incidents?
I think for us to say we want the United States to do this for us is wrong. What we would like to do is to really bring many of our friends and allies, particularly the United States, to see, to be together and to find ways and means to be able to protect, first and foremost, the freedom of navigation, which is in line with the national interest or the interest of the United States and other countries as well. So, with what has happened in the past year, especially in the recent past, where we had a trilateral summit here in Washington, D.C. with Japan and the United States and the Philippines, there you can see that there's already a clear pathway for us to now be together and to simply give a message that we just want peace and security in the area. That is foremost in the minds of all of the countries surrounding the area, particularly Japan, South Korea, and perhaps the other ASEAN nations who are affected by the situation that we're facing right now. That is where we are today.
Given that trilateral summit that just recently concluded, where the U.S. reaffirmed its ironclad commitment to its defense alliances in the Pacific, is it any clearer what that would mean in practice if it did come down to a military conflict with China?
Well, to be honest about it, we certainly don't want to look at it that it will ever come into a conflict. What we are doing, as I said, is to really get all like-minded nations to get together, a multilateral approach to the problem, and hopefully, we are very much hoping that China will come to their senses and simply say that it's best that we discuss this in a manner that is perhaps civil and peaceful. We are reaching out to specifically to ASEAN nations that have the same competing claims as we do. And we're talking and we're continuing to have discussions on how we can secure the area and talk as one with China. This does not have the other countries, the Western countries that China is saying you're bringing into the picture. These are Asian countries that are just as involved as they are in the freedom of navigation and the South China Sea.
I just wanted to mention around 2 years ago, I spoke to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for the Philippines, Secretary Manuel, and he also mentioned at that time that the Philippine government was really undertaking every effort to resolve this through dialogue, to resolve this in a peaceful manner, to encourage good behavior from all sides. In that time, it only seems, however, that the situation has escalated. Are there any other options on the table besides peaceful dialogue? Because again, these incidents continue.
The only thing that we can say is that we will not stop trying. That I think the President has made it clear that we will continue to try for as long as we can find a way to be able to have a peaceful resolution to all of these problems that we have here. But at the same time, we will simply not take it sitting down that there is a country that is dangerously going into a situation where we have to defend ourselves. And so again, that is the reason why we are bringing other countries with the same mindset that the only way to stop China is to deter them from thinking of using force in imposing what they feel is supposedly their territory.
China, of course, as China is wont to do, has taken the shoring up of regional alliances and strengthening of also trans-Pacific alliances as a provocation. The argument is that provides for more potential for conflict and not less. What do you say to that?
Well, each country has their own, I would say, their own path to what they feel is the way to go. But I think that if you look at really the number of nations that have joined the Philippines in our quest for peace in our security in our area, there are many more countries that have joined us and are supporting the arbitral award that was given to us by the United Nations. So I don't see any other way for China to look at this because we're on the right side. And I think that they are signatory to the UNCLOS, and I think that the only way is hopefully there will be an opportunity for us to just find a solution where we will just stay at the status quo and again continue to have discussions on how we can resolve the issues peacefully. There's still an opening there somewhere along the line. That's how we feel about it.
I understand when you say that every effort is being made to find a peaceful way of resolving this. But are you at all worried that there could be an accidental escalation despite everybody's best efforts?
Of course, there's always a possibility that can happen. That is what we're all praying that it'll not happen. But if it happens, I guess it happens, as they say, there's such a thing as their old saying that everything happens for a reason. So if it happens, it probably is a reason why things will just simply have to move according to what the plan is. But nobody wants any conflict. I don't think China wants it. I don't think anyone in the world wants any kind of conflict. But this time around, the prognosis is not very good because we have now the nuclear power countries. And we all know what that means. And I think there's one country that knows it more than anyone else is Japan, because of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I truly hope that people will start looking seriously of what can happen and why we should find every way to be able to keep peace in the world.
Now, you said if it happens, then it happens. What happens next if it happens?
Well, I don't think that anyone can ever say exactly what can happen, but the only thing I can say is both a warning and it's not me giving the warning, but a warning and a bad omen that things will really get just worse for everybody. And I strongly believe, like many other nations, that if anything happens in our part of the world, it will affect the entire world.
Because?
Because it is a major area. And again, if you go back to history, what happened in World War II, and this time around, if there's a complete conflagration of whatever happens in one part of the world, it can just spread all over. That is what we're all hoping and praying that it'll never happen.
What kind of reduction of, I'm going to call them hostilities, what kind of reduction of hostilities or these kinds of incidents are you looking at? Would you look at where you would be able to say we have achieved our strategic goals?
Well, first and foremost is respect our right to be able to supply what our soldiers need that are now in the Ayungin Shoal, there in the Sierra Madre. So if they respect that and they allow us to do that, then we've achieved at least one important piece of the equation. And from there, we can really seriously sit down and talk about how we can resolve the issue from the long term. But until that thing is respected, I don't see any way out of this thing, really. We're not the one that is making any offensive move. We're just simply defending ourselves, that's all. It is really a defensive posture that we're taking. And working with our allies and friends is part of that defense strategy. We are not going into this thing because we plan to invade another country. What we're doing is just simply protecting our territorial rights and our sovereignty. That's all there is to it.
We're in an election year in the US. It is quite possible that President Trump could be in the White House again. He follows very much the America First agenda and is perhaps not as interested in these multilateral relationships, in these alliances. Are you worried about the future reliability of the US as a partner?
I think having served as ambassador even during the time of President Trump, and I dealt with many of his advisors, especially in the national security front, he most likely will have many of them come back, if not some advisors that obviously see the United States as a major player in the world. And I don't see, I'm comfortable in the fact that whoever the president is here in the United States, whether it's President Biden again or President Trump, they'll continue in the same path of really playing a major role in keeping peace in the world. So right now, we at least the Philippines, we feel very comfortable in the fact that we have bipartisan support in what we're doing in our area, and we're very grateful for that.
Ambassador Jose Manuel Romualdez, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you too. Thank you very much again also.